Hello, everybody. Welcome to Choreographer's Fmod Studio integration tutorial. In this video, we'll take a look at how to get game objects in your scene to move along in time with music that is played back through Fmod Studio along with Choreographer Professional. So in this video, we're going to be using Unity 2020.3, which is the latest LTS at time of recording. We're going to use the Fmod Studio and Unity integration version 2.1 or 2.01.07, which is the latest Unity verified release at time of recording. And we're going to use Choreographer 1.6.1, specifically Choreographer Professional Edition 1.6.1. We are going to be using the, it's called the Unity feature demo put together by Fmod themselves as part of the demo to show you how to integrate with an existing project that has Fmod. Our whole purpose here is to simplify things, to talk about the integration process, not about setting up Fmod. There's plenty of resources for that. Okay, we have Choreographer Professional Edition, as I mentioned, and we will also be installing Choreographer's Fmod Studio integration package as part of this video. So what are we going to be doing in this video? Well, we're going to be taking part of the scene that Fmod put together and making little bits of it animate in time with the music in the background. And there's one particular little room that we're going to play with just to kind of showcase the workflow, which is really the purpose of this. So let's see what that's going to look like when we're all done. Awesome. That looks like fun. So let's see how we did that. This is the main scene Overworld v2.0 in the Fmod package. Sorry, the Fmod Unity feature demo. Some points about this setup here that we kind of adjusted. This is originally produced in Unity 2018.4. That's the version they recommend that you use. We updated it to Unity 2020 before recording just to make it, use the latest at the time available for the recording part. It also worked with Fmod 2.0, and we've updated it to 2.1. So that's for the actual Fmod Studio project. We're going to be making no modifications in this room, though this is the scene that we're going to be mostly playing from. However, the scene that we are going to change is this one here, the interactive music room. There's some parts in here. This is the room where Fmod really shows off music playback capabilities. And we are going to be adjusting some things in here and, moving some objects in this space, specifically this green and this yellow room, as you saw in the demo or in the earlier animation. So one other set of changes that we've made, you'll notice that there are some of these objects in here do not have shadows. That was done to kind of simplify things and make it easier to see what was going on instead of really busy, and also to assist in the recording. The other thing that we changed was we removed a whole bunch of camera effects. This project was built with much older versions of technology that are far less efficient, and that's not what we're trying to showcase in this demo. So we've simplified it, turned off those effects, but this is basically what we're going to see. Okay, so Choreographer is installed already in this project. You can see it here in the assets folder right here, and it has some things under editor default resources, plugins. It's got Choreographer here, and it's got all the Choreographer folders all installed, ready to go. So let's add in the Fmod Studio integration for Choreographer. That file is something that you reach out to Sonic Bloom for. You provide your invoice number, and they will send you the packet. I have it right here. I'm going to drag it into the project and show you this here. These are all the files that come in with it, including documentation PDF, which is also available on the web. And I'm going to click import, and all of those things are in. And now, because I already have Fmod and Choreographer installed, everything shows up without any issues whatsoever. All right, so that's all the features required for getting Choreographer and Fmod to work together should now be in place. The Fmod Studio project, which I already have open here in Fmod Studio itself, it's called Fmod Demo Sounds, is fairly sizable. There's a lot of different demos that they show off in here. The one that we are interested in particularly is under the basic room section under events and the interactive music. It's the danger room music. This is the kind of structure that we're going to be looking to pull out pieces of audio that we want to sync to music, or have the animations sync to music. Specifically, we're going to be looking at this zone here, this green flag, which kind of highlights this part of the green file, and the yellow, which is going to be over here in this side of, on the yellow audio file, this kind of range right here. So again, this part of the green and this part of the yellow, those are what we're going to be looking for. One last thing, when dealing with Fmod Studio projects, there is one set of adjustments that need to be made, or at least, in fact, they're defaults. So there shouldn't need to be any changes, but you have to make sure that they are checked. That this here, actually, it's just the one thing. Include audio file names in banks. Choreographer needs to be able to identify the audio files that are played back. And it does that by using Fmod Studio's capability of storing the name of the audio file inside the bank at runtime. If you turn that off, you save some bytes of space, but almost every project now has at least a few bytes to spare. Gone are mostly gone are the days where, 300 bytes is a huge issue. There's usually bigger wins to be had in different assets. So that is now just turned on. It's also recommended. It's also required in order for Choreographer to be able to understand and investigate what's going on in the mix, the audio mix that's being played through Fmod Studio. Okay, great. So that's in place. Let's go back to Unity. The first thing that we need to do in Unity is to make sure, when working with Choreographer, we need to make sure that Unity's audio is enabled. By default, Fmod will, when you integrate Fmod, will disable Unity's audio, because why do you need both? It's just wasted effort. Choreographer's integration in Unity plays back audio through Unity. And therefore, if you're going to do any choreography editing, you really need to have Unity's audio enabled. Now, this is something you can absolutely turn off for the build. You do not need, when you go through the build process, you can turn it off and disable the Unity audio. But for the time span that you're working with Fmod's or with the Choreography Editor in particular, and Choreographer's editor tools, it does need access to those files so that it can actually open up files and you can see waveforms and mark them up and everything. So let's see how we can re-enable Unity's audio. To do that, we're going to go into Project Settings. So Edit Project Settings. And here under the Audio tab is a checkbox right here, Disable Unity Audio. This is normally unchecked in a raw Unity project, but because the Fmod integration is installed, it's checked. So we're going to uncheck that. And please note that this is what we would do once again if we wanted to build. We would turn that off because we're going to be using Fmod for audio. But for now, we're going to not disable Unity audio, so uncheck that. We'll make this go away. And now we should be able to use Choreographer's tools. Okay. To that end, let's open up the Choreography Editor, which is right here under Window. Let me pull that up into the view here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need to do here is create a new choreography. I'm going to click the new choreography button, and it shows me up in these assets folder. I'm going to create a new folder in this space called choreo, just short for choreography. And in here, I'm going to create, let's see, we want to do the green room first. So I'm going to call this the green choreo dot asset. Awesome. So now that's made. I can now just kind of switch to loading up the audio clip. And I'm going to click audio file here so that I can, this yellow button appears and it lets me load an audio file from the file system. And to do that, I'm going to go back up to here in the parent directory, because this is where Fmod packaged everything. There's the Fmod Studio project 2.0 here. Under assets is where all the audio files are. And I'm going to find the green.og file. That's the file right there. I'm going to click open. And now I have my waveform ready to go. One thing I will point out here while we're here is that the BPM is 125. Now, you can always fiddle with that in Choreographer's view here. You can like play with the tempo if you want to adjust that. You can also, if you wrote the music yourself or have access to the composer, you can ask them for what the tempo is. At any rate, we know it's 125 because that's what it was marked up as inside Fmod. So we're just going to type in 125, and we see that everything kind of lines up on those measure lines. Perfect. So that's set up. What we need to do next is create a choreography track, which is where we're going to be actually laying down events. Now, in Choreography is a package of data that kind of lets you, it's a package of event information about kind of like animation events, except for audio, that you put along the audio timeline. So each choreography is tied to one audio file. Then you can add tracks to that choreography data that allow you to, each track allows you to have a separate set of data and an ID. So each track is referenced by a unique ID, which allows you to say like, I want to listen to this track during playback versus this track. So let's add a track to this choreography set so that we can get a unique thing going on here. I'm going to go down here under the track settings section and click new. And we're going to call this greenscale track, because we're going to create some stuff that makes those columns, those green columns, scale in and out, or in the X and Z plane effectively. They're going to do this. So we're going to be scaling those. Let's create that track. And now those are associated, and we have all these buttons that have just been enabled for creating choreography. So the gray room, that first part when you enter that room, really is just this space here. It's that first part, the first 1, 2, 3, 4 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 bars, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, these 4 bars. And you can see it kind of changes a little bit here, the audio. This is the part on where we're in the green room, and that's where we want to start marking up the file and adding an effect. So let's come here and play back. Then I'm going to back it up. It's clear to hear here, but at the beginning of each measure, there's a beow, beow sound that lasts for roughly 3 beats. Let's see if we can hear that at the beginning once again. I'm going to stop playing. Right. So that actually plays back throughout the entire song, even when it gets a little bit more leveled up at this spot here. It's still there in the background. So what we're going to do is take advantage of that and add a little bit of an animation curve so that we can see, the columns will resize along with that effect in the audio. To do this, I'm going to create this, put us into draw mode. I'm going to put us into span mode. Now, the difference between one-offs and spans are A span will allow us to create, a one-off will allow us to create these little singular events. They are basically an instantaneous hit in the audio, and one single event will be triggered for those things. The span is a time, it's an event that lasts for duration of time. So any frame of animation or frame of your game where audio is played back that contains one of those events, you will receive a callback for it so that you can do something cool with that event. So what we're going to do is we're going to create span events like that. Let me actually go back to select. I'm going to select all of these, hit the delete key, get rid of them. I'm going to go back to draw. I've got span selected. Now I'm going to select a payload, which is what to stick inside of that event. And you can create, with Choreographer Professional Edition, you can create custom events, whatever. For this purpose, we're going to be creating a curve event because we're going to use a simple curve, which is a change of the value over time, to affect the scale of those columns. And to do that, let's see what happens here. If I draw now from there to there, we'll see that, oh, look, there is a curve inside of that event, and it's showing us what it looks like. I'm going to double click on it to open the curve editor. And I'm going to come down here. I'm going to, just so I can get this perfect, click edit key, and I'm going to change the value to 1, and I want to change this one to 0 because the audio does that zoom. It's kind of like a fade out curve. I want to make the curve itself that we're dealing with here match that feeling and fade out. So I'm going to bring these tangents down and this one up so that it does this kind of nice little swoop effect. There we go. Now I can actually click it. There we go. So now I have this little effect that goes down. And if I click the viewer here and I play back from here, there it goes. So along then that time, we could see that it was moving along with that sound in the background. So what I'm going to do here is click the clone button. And now that I have this selected, I can clone. I can literally, everywhere I click, it will dump another one of those exact copies. Because this repeats throughout it, and it being the rest of the music, I'm going to tag all of these and just continue the markup until we get to the end there. Great. We've done it. Save project. To save assets in Unity, we go to File, Save Project, which saves all the assets. Now this data is written to disk, so I can close this and I don't have to worry about losing it if Unity closed suddenly or something. The one thing I forgot to mention here is that we do want to change this track event ID. We're going to change this to green scale. The green scale track part was there kind of left automatically from what we named the file initially. For now, I just want to leave this as green scale, and that should be good. And I'm going to undo that, Command Z, Control Z. Undo that. I just accidentally clicked in here and created another one, but I've undone that. So again, File, Save Project. Okay. And up next, we actually have the yellow room. So we're going to basically be doing a very similar setup to walk you through it again, but the markup that we do will be slightly different because the music itself will also be different. So let's do the yellow track now. I'm going to click up here in New Choreography. Going to do Yellow Choreo. Okay. Save. I now have this thing here. I'm going to once again click Audio File and load the audio file. To do that, I have to go back up here, and then I have to go into Assets, and I'm going to pick the conveniently named yellow.og. Okay, open. Now I have this file. It's going to be the same BPM we had last time, so we'll set that value. Now we're going to need to make a yellow scale, because we're going to be doing some scaling animations. So I'm going to yellow scale track, save, and this time I will immediately change that event ID. So now we have yellow scale as the track event ID. And this, again, this is what allows us to specify in the game, hey, choreographer, whenever you hear a yellow scale event, I want to know about it. That's how you register for events. And you can have different objects register for different events and kind of handle all that together. All right. So now we have this sound. We know that we're going to want to do a bit of scaling with this. So let's listen to the audio and see what we can find for something to kind of scale along with it. So there are parts of this. Hold on. There are parts of this that kind of have this really long wah in the background. So what I'm going to do is try to build a curve that matches that with, a bit of an arc to it. So let's go through that process. We'll probably speed this up so that it's not tedious to watch. Okay. So here we go. I've completed now that kind of curve. These are just kind of some animation curves that we want to feel as we're playing through it. We're going to have the chairs in the yellow room kind of do this little effect where they resize based on that in the background of the music in the yellow room. So this should kind of get us what we want here with the yellow scale event. Let's go take a look and move on to the next set of tasks to get everything connected. Okay, so in order for choreography data, which we just saw created, to actually affect objects, objects in the game, we need to create a conduit for a connection between the Fmod Studio playback and Choreographer itself. Now, to do that, we're going to take several steps. The first thing that we're going to do is add a bunch of scripts that are aware of the choreography. They're going to listen for those choreography events that yellow scale and that green scale track information that we put down. We want certain objects to be aware of that. So we're going to add those to those objects to make it so that they'll be aware. After that, we were going to add a couple of components to the scene, one of which will be kind of the main driver for Choreographer, another of which is going to be the kind of the glue that actually allows you to connect choreography with the Fmod aspect of it, with the Fmod engine. And we call these visors. And in this case, it'll be an Fmod Studio event description visor, which will allow Choreographer to listen for specific events played back anywhere in the project throughout playback within Unity. So the first step for this whole thing is to go in and add that script I talked about. So let's do that. The first thing we're going to do here in our interactive music room is find these pillars. Now, these pillars are actually cannons. If I click here, you can see the shape of a cannon. They've just been kind of strategically placed to look like columns. So what we're going to do here is find all of the cannons. Whoops, I have caps lock on. Now we have find all the cannons. And we are going to add a component here. Specifically, we're going to add the cube scaler, which right here, I just typed it in, but I'll show you where it is in the standard layout. It's a Choreographer demo script. This comes with just vanilla Choreographer, but it has some basic features that we're going to build on top of. So we're just going to use that as is for now. So the cube scaler is in here. We're going to make sure that that minimum scale is set to 1. We don't want it to shrink below the normal size. So we now have that scale kind of going from 1 to 1.5. And we're going to have to make some modifications to that script. For now, the original script runs by changing all X, Y, and Z axes. The scale affects all of them. We're going to adjust that script to show only doing the axes you want to affect. But we'll get to that. In the meantime, we need to adjust the scale. We want 1 to 1.5. It'll get to 1.5 times the size. And we want this scale, the event ID, we need to change that to this green scale button. Because we're dealing with the green columns here, we're going to use the green scale event ID. If this didn't exist for some reason, like you created the choreography data, the tracks weren't there, you can hit this R button, which refreshes that list and generates this list from all of the choreography tracks in the project. It loads up everything and says, okay, which of you, what IDs am I not aware of yet, and fills in this list. The yellow scale and green scale are already here, so we'll just make use of them. Okay, so up next, we have the yellow chairs. Now, we've gone ahead and modified the chairs a little bit from the default room. What we did was adjusted the base of the chairs so that they are centered. The pivot point is at the base of the chairs. We did that by adjusting kind of the hierarchy a little bit and move things around so that when they resize from the bottom and can therefore grow and shrink from the ground instead of from the center, which would have them kind of lifting up off the ground. That was a fairly straightforward modification to the transforms. We're not going to cover that in the video, but we will show how to get the chairs to animate using kind of that script that we were talking about before. So we're going to go in here and find all the chairs here by typing in chair, just as we did with Canon in the past. I'm going to go over here into add component. Once again, Choreographer, demos, cube scaler. Now that I'm in here, again, this is going to be, let's add the track, yellow scale this time because we're in the yellow room, and that was how we've configured our choreography data. This time, the max scale that we want these to kind of grow into that size. So the max scale is going to be 1. We do want them to start at half size. So they'll kind of go from small to big, as we saw in the animation. Now, we'll save the scene, and we will next have to modify the script, that cube scaler script, specifically to allow us to constrict which of the axes we care about for that scaling effect. So let's take a look and see what that looks like now. So now that we're in our cube scaler script here, let's go ahead and add some Boolean flags. Well, before we get into that, let's take a look and see how this script is put together. Up here we have the event ID. This is the property that allows us to see that view that says, with the drop down. This attribute says, hey, decorate this string in the inspector with that menu item, the button and the drop down. Otherwise, it's just a string field. In fact, setting those options just fills in the string value. We have the min scale and max scale with their default values set. In start, this is where we register with Choreographer our interest in the events, yellow scale, green scale, whatever you want to put. We just say, hey, Choreographer, I want to know when that event ID happens. And this is the thing I want to do with it. Call this function. Down here, we have the adjust scale function, which takes a bunch of information. And this is kind of the event, which is the actual object that was created in the Choreography Editor. The sample time, which is the exact time in the audio that this is happening, that the audio is at right now. And sample delta is how long since the last audio update happened. The reason that we have this is we have like the time of the last update, effectively the time of this update, which tells us the length in time of the frame in music time and sample data, and the event. If this was a one-off, it would have happened anywhere in between those two bounds. Since we're in a span, it's either inside one or the other, or overlaps that whole space. At any rate, delta slice gets us deeper information. This is kind of an advanced thing. For now, we'll just leave it alone. It's not even used in this function, so we'll ignore it. Okay. So what we're going to do here on destroy, by the way, just as some cleanup, it unregisters for events. This is for completion's sake and to show kind of how this would work. Anyway, in adjust scale here, we're going to look at whether that event has a curve payload. Because you can have multiple different payloads, we need to know, we're only going to be looking at curves. So if this event has a curve payload, cool, let's do something with it. In that case, we get the value at the specific sample time of where the frame is right now, right? Where is the audio now? Show me where in that curve the value is. And we do that by asking the event to give us the value of the curve at the current time. And excuse me, we pass it the current sample time, and that gives us the value in a range of 0 to 1. So if we were really crazy and we had those the curve from 0 to 500, this still gets normalized down into a range of 0 to 1. We multiply that by our values, the min scale and max scale values, which is what determines the actual kind of size that we're going to be applying elsewhere. And down here, you see that we just adjust the local scale based on where we are between the minimum scale and the maximum scale and that value. That's what LERP does, right? Linear interpolation. Simple enough. What we want to do now is say, give us the option to restrict the axes where these things will modify. So the first thing we're going to do down here is we're going to create 3 new public booleans. Public bool scale x. By the way, we're going to set them to all the true by default. Scale y. And you guessed it, scale z. Awesome. The other thing we're going to add is a private value here called, it's a vector 3 original scale. And that will allow us to kind of grab the original scale so that when we're modifying the local transform, we're not just slamming it to a specific value. We can actually adjust the original scale and multiply the original scale. If we don't save that off, and we just multiply that value into the transform, it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger as you multiply, and it'll just kind of compound. So by saving the original, we can then apply, take that original and apply a multiplication. If in the next frame that multiplication changes, we can do it again. And this time we're not doing the modified scale. We're using the original as our starting point. So let's take a look at how we do this stuff. First, in start, we're going to make sure that we save off the original, what the scale is from the scene itself, right, of this object. So we're going to say, okay, The original scale is the transform.local scale. Awesome, that's been saved. Now down here, this is where we're going to use that. But before we do, we want to kind of verify that we get first, what is the scale going to be in this frame? So that's actually expressed here with this little kind of math function. So we're going to say float new scale is that value. That's going to be a single value, like a multiplier for each of the axes. So up next, we're going to create a new vector. So vector 3, new scale vec. And that's going to be, we'll start this with just like a default 111 vector, just for fun. Now, actually, I'm sorry, we don't want to do that. We're going to set this to the original scale. Now, this is a copy because vector 3s are structs, so it's not actually going to reference this. We're not going to modify anything. So what we can do now is go into here, if let's see, scale x, right? So if scale x is true, then we want to say that new scale vec times equals that new scale value. Awesome. Now we're going to do that for y and z as well. And of course, I multiplied the entire thing. What I need to do is just the x component. And once again, new scale vec.z, new scale. Okay, so now we can do this. Now that we have this set up, we can just say that the new scale vec local scale is equal to that new scale vec. So basically what we're doing here is we're getting, what was the scale that this started as? That's what this line is. Then we're going to go through and say, if we want to adjust the original scale in the x direction, we're going to multiply that by the new scale. If we want to do the y direction, we're going to multiply it by that. And if we want the z direction, same thing. So that basically we can determine each individually that we want to pay attention to. This gives us a now properly kind of masked scale set that we can apply to the local scale. And that's what we do here. Okay, so now that we have the ability to select which direction we want things to scale in specifically, let's go back out here and find the cannons or pillars and select them and adjust them as well. This time, so we'll go down here, select them all, and we want them to not scale in that y direction. So that if I, excuse me, that was rotation. If I do, yeah, I don't want that to adjust. What I want to do is just the z and the x. I want that to happen. So by unchecking y, that will leave it as its original scale. We wouldn't get any of kind of the up and down stuff. Awesome. I'm going to save the scene. We'll clear out that. And that's it for the modification. So we now have all of the objects we want to modify with Choreographer should be ready to listen for those modifications. The animation kind of receptacle is ready and waiting for the event to occur. So now we need to add a little bit of that glue in order to make Choreographer be able to understand what's happening in the audio and send those events to these objects which are waiting. To do that, we are going to go back to the main scene here. We're going to go into our scenes. We're going to go into Overworld V2. Excellent. The world spun around because my camera's in a different position. That's our level. Great. So I'm going to make a new object here just because it's easier and cleaner. Call it Choreographer. And we're going to need to add two components here. First is going to be Choreographer and the Choreographer component. This is the kind of core component for Choreographer. It's the glue that allows the audio visors, which are kind of components who specifically watch the audio playing back in Unity, whether with the Fmod integration, from Fmod. If it's Unity audio, it would be through one of the other components that Choreographer comes with. But In this case, this is the system that the visors send information to, and then this is the system that also all those objects register with. So that's the glue that kind of brings both of those pieces together. And we've just added it to the scene, and by default, it will create itself as the singleton, as the global instance. So we don't need any more of them. We just stick that one in and it should be good. And at that point, when all those other objects start up, they will say like, hey, you tell me, I want to know when these events happen. Awesome. So then the other side of the coin is when the audio visor starts up and says, hey, I have an event I need to deliver, it's gonna tell it to this component as well. So how about that audio visor? Let's go into the excuse me. Let's see, Fmod, the choreographer here. We've got Fmod Studio. This folder was added by the Fmod Studio integration. And in here we have two options. Choreographed Event Emitter, which is kind of Fmod's event emitter that's enabled with Choreographer. If you wanted a very granular, specific instance of an event to be choreographed, like let's say you had a special sound effect and it comes everywhere in your game, and you only want it in one instance, that's kind of the idea here, is you can specify it for this specific location in this specific case. The event description visor is more global. That is, any event that you listen for here, any instance of it that's generated by Fmod, Choreographer will be listening for and will send information out, which this is great for music, which is exactly what we're doing. Now that we have the Fmod event description visor installed, I'm going to need to add a choreographed event. Now this is describing an Fmod event, not a choreography event. Gets a little bit wonky, but this whole idea here is that I'm going to add one because there's only one Fmod event to play the music, right? So that's what we're going to mark up here. I'm going to select from Fmod's selector here the events, basic rooms, interactive music, again, that danger music room event. Double click, it's configured. Now I'm going to need this thing called an Fmod choreography set. Let's take a look and see what that is. Because Fmod it stores the sound names as strings, Choreographer needs to be able to map those internally to its own structure. The the choreography set, the Fmod choreography set, allows us to be aware, us being choreographer, to be aware of what the original names were and how to map the choreography that we created at edit time with the file that is brought in. What we're going to do here is go into our choreo section. And this is where we have our green choreo and our yellow choreo. We're going to make a new Fmod choreography set, which is, I right click in here. You can also go to the create menu up under assets, create, and find the Fmod choreography set. That creates this new asset down here. I'm going to call this interactive set, short for interactive music set. And then up here in choreographies, I'm going to create two because we have two choreographies that we want to add. And I'm going to take the green choreo and put that in there. And I'm going to take the yellow choreo and put that in there. And you can see that there are these kind of UTF-8 names that have appeared. These are the original UTF character encoded strings and the byte values that are used and stored inside of kind of Fmod's view. And that's the information that Choreographer uses to match at runtime without incurring lots of cost in terms of memory. Now, that's all stored away, which is what will allow Choreographer, that event description visor to operate. So let's click this little button here and select the interactive set, which is what we want. Awesome. That is basically it. The other options here are target choreographer. I mentioned before that you can have that this choreographer is a global instance. If you wanted to have multiple choreographers in your scene for multiplayer events where you have multiple headsets or different kind of configurations, this is how you can specify, I want like specific events to target this choreographer instance and separate them if that's what you need. Most of the time, you can just leave that as blank. The music player option allows you to use Choreographer's music time API. In this case, this is the music player because we are listening to a music event. But we are not using the music time API, which gets you BPM and a bunch of other related stuff. So it's turning it on and off doesn't matter in this example, but we should describe it so that you know what it is and where it is. Okay, great. So now that that's connected, basically everything should be set for the scene. So let's cover what this looks like top to bottom. We have our choreography data, right? That was these files here we created in the choreography. They run tracks which contain the events. We have this, excuse me, in the other scene, we added scripts to, or components to game objects that understand those events, that can do something with those events. In this case, scaling the game object. The next piece we did was we added the choreographer instance, which is what those scripts are going to connect to in order to receive those event notifications. That's what's going to call those functions and say, hey, new event here. And then right here, we finally created the bridge between the audio playing back in the Fmod Studio system and Choreographer. That visor will manage the complex set of internal like structure that watches Fmod's audio system and sends all the notifications necessary to Choreographer so that it can forward information about events that are happening into the rest of the game. Now, we did apply the choreography to the visor, and the reason that we do it there is because that allows the visor to be very particular about what audio it cares about. There's a lot of audio that can be played back through Fmod's the Fmod Studio engine, and we don't need to care about all of it. We only want to care about the stuff that there's choreography for. So we'll tell that glue code, ignore everything except the audio that for which this choreography that we've handed you exists. So that's where the choreography data is kind of loaded in and made ready. With that, we should have everything in place to be able to test the scene and see it working. So let's take a look. That kind of covers the basics of the integration and just should be enough to get you going. Thank you again for checking out the video and watching. If you're interested in checking out other aspects of Choreographer, there are other tutorials available in our channel. Take a look. And of course, we're available on Discord and via our support email and our own support forums if you need further assistance.